Hello, 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 hello. We'll be starting our study sessions in about 5 to 10 minutes, so you have time to clean or eat the leftovers or get yourself a glass of water. Yes, right there. Yeah. Anyway, we can spread the news that we're starting in about 10 minutes. Okay. All right. We're going to start this study session in like 10 minutes. We're going to slowly move to different areas. Just last stretch before the study session. Shabbat Shalom. How are you?
Good. How are you doing? Very nice
Thank
job.
you. Closer to the rest of the crowd. Do you need anything like, a bite from the kiddush, a glass of water? That's closer. I already did, so I'm ready. Ready to roll.
Rabbi, good to have you here.
My pleasure. The pleasure is all mine. I'm not stressed. More like trying to talk to everybody who's talked to me. How to invite people to be interested in this time.
Tell them next week. Tell them next week. I got no time for you now.
There you go. That's a good
No,
line.
no, that's not the way to go.
Send,
I only have time for those who make a donation to the temple. If you
oh, he's smart.
in excess of
Or send me a text. I'll put you in line.
No, I have seen this.
I'm Fred too, by Fred Jenkins.
Yeah.
You probably talked to my wife
I did.
more than you
So,
talked.
so I once saw something that I couldn't really believe it. Because, I was spending my holidays in Georgia, but not Georgia the state, Georgia the country. And I went to the synagogue for Rosh Hashanah. There's like 5 minutes, actually 5 minutes to light candles, festival candles. And there was somebody looking at 5 minutes. Some words. What would To let you know, they left it 5 minutes before the candles, so it was very quick. It was very passionate. You know, bring the money. Fundraising. I hear you. I mean, without 6 o'clock in the morning, I just function. No, for me, it's 2 in the morning, it's 1 in the day, and then if this is a very low board meeting, there's a fourth one, but we're starting in 3 minutes. Starting. I worked in a summer camp. I was never cooking ever.
I figured that's where we will
Yes.
live with us.
Not just you, but to the third and fourth generation. I will revisit my rocks.
Okay, well, is it the luck? The one that cursed, tried to curse?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, well. Because you tried.
I tried. You recorded. Starting 2 minutes. I don't.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Elevator building now.
Hello, can you hear me? So we need to start. We need to start because our Zoom master told me that this is the time when the Zoom people are going to join us. So we need to give them the courtesy of being punctual. So there we are. Thank you so much for staying for this learning opportunity. Oh, now I can hear myself, which is better, and maybe you can hear me as well. And I was thinking about what to teach, and then I realized that there is a common theme in the book of Numbers where we are now, and that this is the book of obviously where they are wandering in a desert, Bamidbar, in the wilderness. But the topic of this journey through the wilderness is that they go and meet different peoples. And they learn about themselves through interactions with different peoples. So I thought that our first study session could be devoted to that. And I think there's one more factor that inspired me to pursue this topic. So I started adding you on Facebook. And, well, many of you I've added when I first came here, soon after I was offered a position here. And I was posting my pictures, and people were commenting on them and kind of accompanying me before I came here. And you learned a bit about my world. And then I came here, and I was taking pictures of Fullerton, and people told me that they have seen Fullerton through the new eyes, because you've lived here for a long time. And I just moved here, and I'm looking at it and seeing something that you might be taking for granted. So this is where the topic of this session came to be. And I must say, this kind of like learning from each other and growing together, it wasn't apparent to me that this is a process until I saw what I actually clicked as to print. And I saw that I spelled through in a way that I'm used to spelling through, so it's through others' eyes, and this is a slightly different way than Americans would spell through. And I realized that this is exactly this process of me learning the TBT ways, and you learning a bit more about my background, not just on Facebook, but through contact. And this is exactly what happened to the Israelites in the desert as well. So our session today is basically, as I mentioned, it's called Through Others' Eyes. And then it has one question that I ask you to kind of put in the back of your mind as we go through the sources, which is, what can we learn when we look at ourselves from others' perspective? So what are the insights? What are the new impulses for reflection and growth that we can get when we encounter others and learn from them? Or maybe not learn from them, but also just see ourselves as others see us. So step out of our comfort zone and look at ourselves anew from a perspective of a stranger. And we have 5 different lessons that we can learn. Some lessons have multiple sources. Some lessons have a singular source. But this is just a selection of gleanings of things that we can learn when we look at ourselves anew from somebody else's perspective. Obviously, this is such a big topic that we could spend probably a month sitting here. So this is just a selection and an impulse to study more. And if you want to know more and study more, very happy to do it, be it in a group setting or individually. Next time, and this is also a learning curve, I will post it to our Zoom people so they have a source sheet. But this time, what I would ask you to do when we read the sources, I'll actually pass the mic to whoever will read the source, so that our Zoom participants can also be with us and know what the source is about. Well, I was thinking, what is the source that we should start from? What is a good beginning? And I don't find a better beginning for a Jewish learning session than the words of Matovu, because A, we all know it. You know, Matovu, what we sing when we enter the synagogue, and B, it's such a powerful phrase that we associate with the beginning. And we know roughly what it means, you know, how good are your tents, so the places where you live, Israel, we say this is about the houses of prayer, but actually rabbinic literature has a slightly different take on this. But first, we need to come back to the original quote, which appears in the parasha last week. So just a week ago was Matovu time, so the time when one reads the words of Matovu from the scroll. And it goes like this: as Balaam looked up from a mountain and saw Israel encamped tribe by tribe in this very special, very structured position to each other, the Spirit of God came upon him. Taking up his theme, because he spoke before Balaam, he said, "Ma tovu ochalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Israel." So, what does it mean at face value? What is he saying at face value? Exactly, cool tents. You know, you have plenty of tents, and they look nice. They might be sturdy. You know, they made from a good material, maybe a rich material. Maybe he's admiring the layout, how orderly they are arranged, because it does look like a military camp. So you know, so at the so-called pshat level, so like a literal level is, you know, when you go to somebody and say, well, you have a cool tent, you don't think, oh, he means my spiritual well-being. I mean, you know, a cool tent is a cool tent. So at the kind of the pshat level, so the very literal level of this word, this is what it means. But then we have our commentators starting to nitpick at the thing, and they always try to find hidden meanings, and you will see it in just a second. Miriam, why don't you read for us what Rashi says, and I will give you the mic so that our Zoom participants can hear you.
Matovu ohalecha, how good are your tents. He, meaning Balaam, said this because he saw that the entrances of their tents were not exactly facing each other.
Thank you so much. So why would the tents be called good? Because they are not facing each other.
Well, typically, if you're setting up a bunch of tents, you want the entrance to the tent be downwind. So if it rains or winds blow, in this case sand, the opening is away from that. So all the openings would always face in one direction and not facing each other, because somebody would get the winds blowing sand into their tent and so forth.
So I see a merit in this, because then, you know, there are four corners of the world. So, you know, so if they face in different directions, then, you know, statistically, 1/4 of them would get some sort of wind. So then, you know, there are millions of Israelites. So you have millions of Israelites with sand in their tents. That makes you know, practical sense. But Mitch has a different idea.
I try to think of two environments that have existed that maybe we either saw in movies or I don't think any of us saw it in real life, but at least in the movies, in terms of tents and locations. Normally speaking, if you were in the Army and you were on bivouac, your tents would be lined up in rows, because you'd have rows to go down just like squares. And having them lined up in rows reflected order and potential military strength, much easier to guard. Another way of having strength, if you remember the old Western movies of circling the wagons, you'd put a circle around, so really all the openings would be at different places, but it would give you a lot of protection, because each opening was slightly off, because the opening of the wagon would be in a different part of the circle, going in making it all around. So eventually the openings would be in all aspects, so you could have a view of everything around you. But I think to some extent the beauty of Ma Tovu could be reflected by what we have seen historically were our First Nation people. The Indian tribes never set up their camps in perfect circles. They were all scattered all over the place, very much like this potential interpretation of what Balaam was saying. I find that interesting.
So, first of all, thank you so much for this comment, and actually that, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, these were not just the military. This was all the families of Israel. And so each tent had a family. And to be able to have your own entrance and exit and not have the people across from you staring in at you gives you some privacy. And that's why you don't have windows that face each other. Even in today's zoning laws, when they build houses close together, they try to alter window locations so that you can, you know, have privacy. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cindy. So I will refer first to Mitch's comment. So Mitch, thank you so much for that. This idea of wagons and making a circle. So that made me think of one of the medieval tactics of the Hussites. So there was like early Protestants, you know, pre-Protestants who defeated knights in exactly this way. They would use wagons, a kind of military structure, and there was even something called a military formation called Wagenburg. So literally a wagon castle of having a circle of wagons that was then defended. But I want to come back to what Cindy said and actually say that Cindy, in her comment, has a mind of the Talmudic scholar, because our tractate Bava Batra, then our next source, will tell you something very similar. But before we delve into it, we need to find out what Bava Batra is. So Talmud has, as we know, many, many tractates, and they deal with all kinds of things. And there was one behemoth of a tractate devoted to all kinds of civil law, so long and so unwieldy to print that the and transcribe, and also so much longer than any other tractate that our rabbis decided to divide it into 3 tractates called 3 gates, because bab means a gate. Even today in modern Arabic and in Maltese, bab or bib is a gate. So 3 gates, you know, 3 gateways to the civil law, and Bava Batra was a law specifically dealing with home ownership. So it was literally the law of a homeowner. So, you know, or a landlord, or we could also call it in our modern terms of a property developer. So what a person that owns property, rents property, builds property, what are their rights and obligations? And let's see what the zoning regulations from the Talmud, you know, this is written, this is codified 6th century. The laws probably come from the 4th century. So these laws are 1700 years old. From where do we derive the law which states that one may not open an entrance opposite another entrance, or a window opposite another window? So they have a law exactly like the zoning laws. You can't build a door facing another door. You can't build a house with a window facing another window. So the same zoning laws that we might be familiar with, and they try to figure out where in the Torah can we pin it on. You know, they want to find a verse in the Torah that would justify that. And then Rabbi Yochanan says that it derives from the following verse: as Balaam looked up and saw Israel encamped tribe by tribe, the Spirit of God came upon him. Rabbis ask, which is a rhetorical figure to say to say that there is a question that we have to the story. What was it that Balaam saw that so inspired him? He saw that the entrances of their tents were not aligned with each other, ensuring that each family, and here's where Cindy's comment comes into play, enjoyed a measure of privacy. And he said, if this is the case, these people are worthy of having the divine presence rest upon them. So according to the Talmud, what does it mean that the tents of Jacob are good? They have common sense site planning, and at the same time, that the way we build our buildings ensures families' privacy. So yes,
that's a value, and it's understood that as a society that lives together in density, that the design aspects influence
So the comment here says that the city planning and and space design is a value, and that the need for privacy is something is seen as a valid human need that needs to be enshrined in law, and this is societally recognized.
Well, it's potentially so much more than that. Like, it's nuanced and there's a lot of layers, but I think of like kashrut, the idea that if, having an awareness.
Yeah.
Trying to speak loud, so I don't have to touch the microphone. Having an awareness of the sanctity of holiness sort of elevates how you approach life and your fellow humans. So I think.
So I think that's a very good comment and a very valid point. But I think I like the idea that spatial awareness and how we design places where we live is important in Judaism. That, the rabbis in 4th century saw it as a valid point, and that actually their ideas of zoning laws were similar to things that we would hope our property developers would subscribe to today. And also this need for privacy for each family. That's probably not something that we expect for them to see as a value in densely populated cities with people having way less personal space than we have here in California.
I mean, I wonder how that compared to other peoples at the time. Did they not have those values? Did they not understand? Was it that different? Oh, I wonder how compared to other peoples at the time, did other societies not have those values? And was it that different? I think it's also reflective of education and maybe wealth or some kind of values that are passed down.
So I think that's a good point. Usually we compare the culture of Israel, or also called Jerusalem, with Rome and with the Roman culture. And that's true that the Roman culture, if you think about the Roman culture, it took place in the public space, in the agora. So they were very big on public space and being present in public. So this is where the focus of at least a male life was, because obviously men were seen as more important in Rome. And I think this is in contrast with what rabbis say here, saying, well, what is most important for us is family life. The most important things happen at home, in the privacy of one's home, with one's family, and with invited friends. So that's I think our first takeaway, that the good tents might be the tents of our temples, which we often see in the explanations, but it can also mean that the temples or the tents of our homes. So how the kind of privacy that we enjoy with our family.
One last comment on that. If you go through the ancient streets of Jerusalem, which were in existence before Batra may have written what he wrote, again, the ancient city, the most ancient city. Okay. Yeah. If the ancient city of Jerusalem was already in place, whether it was there or even up in where the first temple was at, I forgot all of a sudden. If the city was built around that temple, did they lay it itself out this way for family privacy? Because every time I've walked through the old city, it appears it's house against house. There are no side windows. There's only one entrance and one exit, and the front doors all face the same way. If there's someone across the street, even like in a modern America, yeah, you have some space in between, but if the principle is that door should not be facing door, we have really messed up our urban environment, including in ancient Jerusalem, if we not. Maybe Kenny the planner can tell us about that.
So I think that modern Jerusalem is not an indicator of how ancient Jerusalem was laid out, because modern Jerusalem, first of all, ancient Jerusalem was in a slightly different location. Half of what is now the old town in Jerusalem wasn't the ancient old town in Jerusalem. The city has moved, and the walls that encircle it are a 16th century addition to Jerusalem. And also, when we think about the Jewish quarter, well, the Jewish quarter is a 1960s reconstruction. So so in a way, it doesn't reflect at all the city planning of ancient times. Also, what we do know is that the houses usually, they had few outside windows. They had one gate to the courtyard, and the gate didn't lead straight to the rooms, but it led to the courtyard. So in a way, even if the doors faced each other, it was kind of like a door to a courtyard facing courtyard. It wasn't a door to somebody's private chamber. So in this sense, that wouldn't have been seen as a violation of these rules, because it wasn't a door facing a door to a strictly private space. So that is our first Matovu opening, gleaning from looking at ourselves through the eyes of others, the eyes of Balaam, the Jewish commitment to family and privacy. And then we have our second gleaning that actually comes from our portion. So we have the story of the daughters of Tzelofehad. And for this, I need a woman, because it's one of the most feminist readings in the entire Tanakh. So there's a need for a woman to read it. Who could read it?
The daughters of Zelophehad, of the Manassite family, son of Hefer, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, son of Joseph, came forward. The names of the daughters were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the chieftains, and the whole assembly at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and they said, "Our father died in the wilderness. He was not one of the faction, Korach's faction, which banded together against the Eternal, but died for his own sin, and he has left no sons. Let not our father's name be lost to his clan just because he had no son. Give us a holding among our father's kinsmen." Moses brought their case before the Eternal. The Eternal said to Moses, "The plea of Zelophehad's daughters is just. You should give them a hereditary holding among their father's kinsmen. Transfer their father's share to them."
Thank you so much. So it was a hard one because we have all these names that don't quite roll off your tongue. And also mean very interesting things like Tzelofehad, so it's the one who fears the shadow of death, just a wonderful name to give to your child. The one who fears the shadow of death. Sounds like Lord Voldemort. But jokes aside, we have a very interesting bit here, because there is a moment when Moses, guess what? Moses doesn't know. And somebody comes to Moses and makes his case. In this case, 5 women make their case that, actually, it's not their fault that they have no brothers, and their father didn't die as a sort of punishment for taking part in one of many rebellions in the book of Numbers. So when the Israelites are grumbling, and every parasha, every Torah portion, every week we read about a revolution. That's almost like France. So in any case, they are in a position where they're left with nothing, and they don't believe that it is just. And Moses, who's clueless, he has no idea what to do in a situation like this. He needs to ask God what is the right thing to do here. And God says, actually, the daughters of Tzelofehad are right. Give them their father's share in the inheritance of this tribe, and from now on the women can inherit as long as they stay within the same tribe. Of course, the women's right to inherit will be expanded upon by the rabbis in the future. But this is where the women's right to inherit in the Jewish tradition starts, or is believed to have started. Well, what does this story teach us about the way we relate to each other as a society? Mitch?
Well, that story, I think, is radical to its times because it was all male-dominated. Only the son inherited. If there wasn't a son, then the brothers would inherit. And so that if there are only female children until this came down, is they had no rights. So I see two things. The Torah tells us that if you fight for something you believe in, at least in my mind, the women came and said it's not fair They made their argument like they were going to the Supreme Court, and the end result is the Supreme Court ruled in their favor.
I think this is a great comment, and it's very close to how I see the story. This is basically a story that one could and should show to Orthodox Jews who tell you that you know the Jewish tradition never changed, when in the Torah itself you have it proof that it changed. So the fact that basically for me the takeaway message from the story is that the fact that a social order exists right now and it's enshrined in law does not mean that it is just. And you know, and pay attention to the word that God uses when they make their case. It is just. So there's this question of what is legal, because there is a legal tradition of a certain kind, and what is the just or the right thing to do. That's how I read the story. But maybe there are other ways of reading it. Yes? Go ahead.
I don't think it's necessarily a different way of reading it, but I think this is describing a building of a nation. So you're starting from just people, and then slowly as they go through the wilderness, they become people. And as they become people, they encounter different issues that they haven't encountered before. So every time there is a need to think about a different issue in a different way.
I think I really like this idea, and I think that it really resonates with both with the development of democratic societies and with the development of this country as well. You know, when we think about the Constitution, you know, kind of like, and you see who is supposed to be a citizen and a free person, right? So there's this tendency of, you know, going from rich white men to white men to the people who are white, to everybody who can be a citizen and an equal player in society, and not just here in America, but also in other societies. So this growing concept of who is a member of the political nation, or who is a person who has rights, and how many rights this person has as a journey through the wilderness. I really love this idea of, you know, of this process of bigger society, or society becoming more diverse, being a process of almost like a wandering through the wilderness, because it's not an easy process, and it has its setbacks, and it takes a long time. It's not without its revolutions and its and a backlash. So I really like this image of this not just being about women's right to inherit, but about nation building in a political and legal sense, and also in the sense of like who we consider as a full-fledged member of who we are as people. And let us see what medieval rabbis thought about this. And now it's time to get you acquainted with Bamidbar Rabbah. So Bamidbar Rabbah literally means a great desert, but Rabbah is a name usually given to the books of Midrashim. And Midrashim are these stories that rabbis came up with to fill in the gaps in the biblical narrative and comment on the stories in the Torah and the rest of the Hebrew Bible, but not comment in a philosophical sense, but more comment by adding extra stories. And this is what they said about this verse. And it is written, Moses brought their cause before the Eternal. Some say that God made this become too hard for Moses, as there are righteous people that become overly proud of their knowledge of commandments. So basically, the daughters of Zelophehad were able to bring it, because God made it too hard for Moses, to teach him that he doesn't know everything, that his experience of a man who always has rights is not an experience of a woman who needs to fight for this right. So that's a very interesting comment from the 12th century, telling us that, well, actually, how we see the world very much depends on our standing, and some people who were born in a certain position of certain rights or privilege or legal privilege might not be able to understand other people's positions. So the daughters of Zelophehad need to come here and make their case, because a man of this era who has never experienced not having inheritance rights probably wouldn't have come up with it. So the sense of, you know, that in a way, disenfranchised groups need to fight for their place at the table and change the societal order and enrich it to lead the way to a more inclusive society. So this is our second lesson. And the lesson number 3 also comes from the book of Numbers and might come from it comes from the story that you might know. So the story of the 10 scouts. So the 10 people, Moses sent 12 people to scout the land of Canaan, to give him a report if it's a good land. And 10 of them come back, and 10 of them basically whine and moan and groan and tell how it's impossible to ever conquer this land. I need a volunteer, and maybe because it's scouts and scouts were male, maybe we could have a man this time. Greg, would you mind? Perfect.
We, the scouts sent to gather information about the land of Canaan, saw the Nephilim. The Anakites are part of the Nephilim, and we looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them.
Thank you so much. And obviously, yet another portion of text where we have no idea what does it mean that somebody is a part of Nephilim. So here's for commentary. This is coming back to Genesis 6. It was then and later too that the Nephilim appeared on earth, when divine beings cohabited with the human women who bore them offspring. So Nephilim is this, in the very early stages of the Torah, when Torah contains some of the more, how should I put it, mythological elements. I think it's a fair thing to say. So we have the idea of Nephilim, so kind of some sort of angels or celestial beings coming to earth and having children with human women, and these children are the Nephilim, so they're giants. So they meet in this. The scouts come and they supposedly meet these giants, and then say, and we looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them. Well, that's a question. What is interesting about this statement? Is it something that's puzzling to you, or something that's not intuitive? Michael.
Well, the non-intuitive part comes right away. It's like playing peekaboo with a child. I can't see you, so you must not be able to see me. So the way you appear to yourself is the way that you believe the rest of the world sees you, whether true or no. So a child says, I'm invisible because I can't see you. These people are saying, we must look small. We look small next to you, therefore you see us as small.
I love the peekaboo. I love the peekaboo metaphor. I think this is exactly it. So how do they know how these Nephilim see them? And this is where the story, story adding starts. So this is where the midrash starts, because, well, obviously, if you had giants who are much faster than you, because they're much taller than you, can run faster, if they saw them, then probably they would have gotten interested in them and maybe even killed them. So it's quite possible that they haven't seen them, or they didn't see them as a threat. So then the rabbis jump in and try to explain it, and they say the following, that actually Nephilim did see them, and they are hiding in the trees. And that Nephilim are there at the bottom of the tree saying, oh, look, there are some small creatures there on the tree. But because the scouts are so insignificant, they don't pay much attention to them. So then the rabbis kind of try to streamline this text. But as we see, it sounds rather far-fetched. You need to add a lot of content and storytelling to add to this story for it to make sense. But our book of Midrashim to the book of Numbers, Bamidbar Rabbah, does something with it that I really like. And it stays kind of closer to the text, but also explains what the real problem with the scouts was, and also a problem that stays in character. You don't need to add, stories about them climbing on trees and giants circling around the trees and them looking like ants to the giants. There is a story that's kind of very psychologically plausible. And that is what Bamidbar Rabbah says. They, the scouts of the land of Canaan, said, and in our own eyes we were like grasshoppers. The Holy One, blessed be God, said, I forgave them for that remark, but I was exacting what they said, and so we were in their eyes. The Holy One, blessed be God, said, did you know what I made you in their eyes? Who would say that you were not like angels in their eyes? What they had brought upon themselves as a result of God not being forgiving, according to the number of days that they were scouting the land, that you explored the land, the punishment will be circling the desert for 40 years. And that's a lesson that I find really interesting, that God is able to forgive them for thinking that they were small, having their own moment of doubt about themselves. But God is not willing to forgive them the fact that they thought that others think that they are small. And I think there is a very powerful lesson here about us and how we see ourselves in the world. If we see ourselves as small compared to other people, continuously small, then we won't be able to reach our full potential. We won't be able to act as equals. We won't even try. So that is according to Bamidbar Rabbah the reason why they felt so insecure about the chances of conquering the land, and this is why they were punished with 40 years of wandering in a desert. Any comments, questions, shouts of protest?
This also relates to one issue that's a button issue with me in general, and that is the way we perceive other people. The one that bothers me the most is and some people here have heard me say it, is what we call the golden rule: do not do unto others that which is hateful to you. And I keep saying, if I like S&M and I like people to beat me up because it makes me feel good, then it's okay for me to beat other people up, according to the golden rule, because it's not hateful to me, so it's good to do it to them. And what we should say is, do not do unto others that which is hateful to them, which means you have to take the time to understand the background, the culture, the basis of the other person you meet. And in here, it's self-centered. It's my perception on somebody else, and therefore, this is what I believe of them, without taking the time to get to know them, understand them, get a little more knowledge about them, and then see that your preconceptions are wrong. But the Torah tends to be very self-centered in how we deal with other people.
So I really like this idea, because I think it's really close to this midrash, this sense that that actually, if we have a negative or narrow view of the world, that's bad. But if we also project this on everybody else, then the chances of having any meaningful dialogue or growing together are just not there. And I think there's this very interesting way of classifying world's cultures. So Hofstede's cultural dimensions, and one of them is trust. So whether we believe that other people can be trusted. If we have a sense that other people can be trusted, I can't be trusted and nobody else can be trusted, then a culture has a real problem. when it comes to growing and working together, because then the circle of people who you can work with is very narrow. And if on top of this you don't even trust yourself like the scouts did, well, then you are in a trouble, because you not only believe you don't believe you can help yourself, but you don't trust others to help you out. So really you are in a really tragic position. There was a comment.
Yeah, I'll wait for the microphone. Is that the appropriate? Sure. I think Steve's comment is right on, and I like that sort of variation of the golden rule, and I think your comment about trust is an important nuance to that. So thank you for that. My thought was that it's an admonition against self-loathing and self-hate, and kind of like an inverse encouragement towards self-love and acceptance and forgiveness.
And this brings us to the fact that we are 10 weeks away from High Holidays, so thank you. Thank you, and I think that maybe, who knows, I might use this midrash in our High Holiday study sessions. Is it a comment or just? That's also, that's also a commentary. Torah as a band-aid. Then our fourth lesson that comes. Mitch, have you got? Okay, great. I think it actually does. So go ahead. This is our fourth lesson.
The next day, Moses sat as magistrate among the people, while the people stood about Moses from morning until evening. But when Moses' father-in-law, Yitro, saw how much he had to do for the people, he said, "What is this thing that you are doing to the people? Why do you act alone while all the people stand about you from morning till evening?" Moses replied to his father-in-law, Yitro, "It is because the people come to ask me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, it comes before me, and I decide between one party and the others, and I make known the laws and teachings of God." But Moses' father-in-law, Yitro, said to him, "The thing you are doing is not right. You will surely wear yourself out, and these people as well, for the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Now listen to me. I will give you counsel, and God be with you. You represent the people before God. You bring the disputes before God, and enjoin upon them the laws and the teachings, and make," flip the page, "known to them the ways they are to go and the practices they are to follow. You shall also seek out from among all the people capable individuals who fear God, trustworthy ones who spurn ill-gotten gain. Set these over them as chiefs of the thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and let them judge the people at all times. Have them bring every major dispute to you, but let them decide every minor dispute themselves. Make it easier for yourself by letting them share the burden with you. If you do this, and God so commands you, you will be able to bear up, and these people too will go home unwearied." Moses heeded his father-in-law Yitro and did just as he said.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderfully legal statement, but at the same time, it was almost like a consultant coming to organization and trying to give, institution building advice. And just for context, so Yitro is obviously Moses' father-in-law, but why seeing ourselves through the eyes of others? Because Yitro is not Jewish. Yitro is not only not Jewish, he's a priest of Midian, so it's a priest of a different religion coming to advise effectively the most important person in the Israelite religion. Obviously in Midrash, our rabbis convert Yitro. They can't stand that somebody non-Jewish would give us advice, but let's stick to the pshat, to the literal meaning of the text. Here we have one person coming from one culture to being in a similar role, giving a person in a newly established sort of religious community or re-established religious community, giving him advice how to build institutions. And I must say, I really like it, because it shows us that the fact that we might be ready to do something new, and we set off to start a project, also a religious project, doesn't know that we know how to do it just because we have a lot of passion for it, and we are willing to invest time. You know, we might find ourselves in a situation like Moses, that yes, we're able to do it, but somebody actually knows how to do it better, and maybe letting others help us with advice and then delegate could help us, could benefit us. And it actually makes me think of this process of development of religion, where religions did it to each other. Judaism borrowed some of the things that Judaism did away with multiple gods, but borrowed some of the prayers and some of the ideas from the local religions that accompany that surrounded it. Then Christianity copy-pasted many of the ideas of Judaism into their organizational structures, and so forth it goes. So this idea that religions borrow from each other, the institutional structure, the idea of institutional structures to grow, and that's also what societies do. So for instance, I come from Poland. After the fall of communism, there was a 50-year break in people knowing what it does mean to live under democracy. So there were people from the US, from Western Europe, coming to the country to basically saying, well, this is how the institutions really work, not just what the constitution would say. You know, you can write a nice, new, shiny democratic constitution, but how does it work in practice, you know, in a sub-department of the ministry? People didn't know that, you know, how it works in an effective and democratic way. So this had to be taught, and this know-how was partially shared by people coming from more established democracies. The same, you know, entering a new market or in countries that used to be communist. Also, there was this idea that you need to learn how to lead a market economy in a country like that. So this idea of, well, you need to delegate, and you need to accept the fact that some of this you might delegate, outsource, because only then you will get the know-how that you need. I'm thinking about the temple. Our temple has many strong points, but I wouldn't want our temple to be responsible for its own payroll. There's a reason why we delegate payroll to outside companies. And that is already there in the Torah. You know, take the help, even if it comes from a place that seems to be far away from you, from a very different different religion, because their advice and their help could be influential. Yes, Cindy?
I just wanted to say that the last two examples just show how the humility of Moses made it so successful. He could have been, I know everything, I don't need to ask God, I can make up the answers myself, when the women came to ask him. And he could be telling his father-in-law, I don't need to listen to you, I'm the boss. And I'm so important, I need to make all the decisions. All those would have been terrible, but he's open enough and has enough humility to say, there are good ideas that could come from anywhere. There are new things I need to think about. I better ask God, I better look around and try to get the right answers. And I think that shows his strength. It also shows the strength of Judaism, that they can be open to recreating itself, changing itself when there's a better idea.
Evelyn first.
This lesson speaks to me as a former president of the sisterhood, and how important it is to empower people on your team, in your organization, to do things that they can do really well, and the empowerment that makes it a better organization. Everybody has a role to play. Another thing about this is that in doing that, you have to have trust in that person. And many people who have this problem of I have to control everything, is because they don't trust others to do a good job. And it really does matter that you trust someone to do something that you can do, but don't need to, because there are other people that can help you. And if you want an organization to run well, you have to have the trust, you have to know who is able to do those jobs, and let them try to do the best they can in those jobs. If they don't do as well, they get help to make it better next time. So it's a very good lesson. It really makes me feel good that Moses learned that lesson, and his father-in-law was wise enough to give him that advice to allow not only just cultures, everybody has something to give to the table, so it doesn't matter where they come from, as long as they have that ability to help and bring more people together to do the job.
This excerpt that we just read is a rather interesting one, because there was a book that came out about 20 years ago. It was called Moses on Management. And basically it provided 50 MBA examples of Moses' ingenuity, Moses' activity, things that he did in manipulating the people to maximize their activity and their ability to get along and do things. This particular passage is one of the 50 that's itemized in the book. It's a fascinating read, and it's absolutely an essential one for anyone who's in a managerial position. And it truly draws on the classics of the Torah as to how to manage people.
I think, Jesus was definitely an inspiring preacher, but given that he was an itinerant person with no permanent address, he was probably more of a preacher than a manager, I would say. But not my religious community. I will not borrow Jesus to give institutional advice along the lines what would Jesus do. But I think what I can speak about is one verse that I cut off, and I think Evelyn inspired me about thinking about it. About this Moses as a person who's humble and a person who exists within a certain structure, including a family structure. So I must say, it made me think about Yitro more, because the verse that I cut out is that Moses implements Yitro's plan. And on the next morning, Yitro packs his bags, kisses Moses, Tzipporah and his grandchildren goodbye, and Yitro leaves. And Midrash says, he leaves just for a time, and then he comes back and lives with them, and they lived happily and joyously ever after. But the plain version, plain text of the Torah says that Yitro leaves. And I always wondered, why did Yitro leave? And actually, what we discussed here made me think that maybe he left, because think about it. There's a queue from here back to Egypt of people who want to see Moses. Somebody comes and introduces a system that works and probably helps Moses in the process of implementing the system, right? Trains these people, advises him, tells Moses, you really need to delegate this one. Man, listen. So, so it's not you don't have a system to operate a society of 2 million people. It's not like Moses is going to be here, here, and here, done, finito. It is a process. So Yitro was involved in all of this, and he's senior. It's quite safe to assume that if you implemented a system that works, that he would upstage Moses. That Moses, after the system was implemented, would be seen as number 2. So what Yitro does, Yitro knows when to leave the stage, to let Moses run the new system. And I'm thinking about, boards and, changes on the board, and rabbis emeritus and so on. Sometimes it's very important how we work in a way that we support somebody but don't upstage somebody, even if we have way more experience, knowledge, and knowledge on us. So that takes probably an even greater humility. So so that's actually really moving to think that it is that the father-in-law comes to the rescue, saves sons-in-law business, kisses his daughter goodbye, kisses grandchildren goodbye, and comes back from this visit knowing that they're safe and that their work-life balance and their family structure is flourishing, and the society is flourishing as well. Big kudos for Yitro. Well, and what can I say? That maybe there is a reason why the Ten Commandments are first mentioned in a portion called Yitro, named after a non-Jew, because without Yitro and his institutional advice, well, you might have 10 commandments. How would you implement a system that would work for a society without Yitro? Also, a strong case for for non-Jews who support the Jewish community, be it as converts as rabbis would have it, or as our partners and family members who are not Jewish but very, very supportive. And the last text that I wanted to bring does not come from the Torah, but is a poem by a modern poet born 1947, who's a poet, playwright, educator, and a peace activist, Merle Feld, a poem that some of you might know, which tells us that, well, actually, there are many perspectives in the Torah that were not there are many perspectives in the Torah, but many perspectives were not included or barely included in the Torah, because the Torah reflects a certain narrative of a group that was in power. So men, learned men, mostly married and most likely heterosexual. So Merle Feld kind of has a poem that touches upon it from a feminist perspective. I absolutely love it, and I think we need a woman, a female voice, to read it.
We all stood together. My brother and I were at Sinai. He kept a journal of what he saw, of what he heard, of what it all meant to him. I wish I had such a record of what happened to me there. It seems like every time I wanted to write, I can't. I'm always holding a baby, one of my own or one for a friend, always holding a baby. So my hands are never free to write things down. And then as time passes, the particulars, the hard data, the who, what, when, where, why, slip away from me, and all I'm left with is the feeling. But feelings are just sounds, the vowel barking of a mute. My brother is so sure of what he heard. After all, he's got a record of it. Consonant after consonant after consonant. If we remembered it together, we could recreate holy time, sparks flying.
For me, this poem is probably one of the most important poems written about the reform, or broadly speaking, non-Orthodox approach to revelation, or what actually happened on Sinai and what our tradition is. Because we could treat the Torah, and we treat the Torah as a definite version of what happened. But we also, as progressive Jews, we know that Torah is a product of human hands, and and of the educated group, a group that had power back then. So by definition, it's a perspective of men and educated men and that, and educated men of a particular caste, to make it even narrower. So our practice, as we look at the Torah, needs to be, yes, we need to honor it, but honoring it is a part of what I call religious archaeology, of looking at the texts that don't seem to fit this narrative, and see them as vestiges of the breadth of life that was available there and that happened there. So, for instance, the daughters of Zelophehad, in a masculine society, we don't know when they lived, but in the masculine society, we have 5 brave women who stood up for themselves and changed history. So this is exactly the kind of voices that as progressive Jews, we need to keep elevating and look for them, for the voices that speak about multiple perspectives and enrich the text. There is a beautiful concept of the Torah, in a way, having been harmed by being so narrow. So that the concept of Torah, of us actually by elevating the other voices that are present there, if only marginally, we're healing the text, because the text of of revelation was done injustice by cutting it so narrow, by squeezing it into a certain pattern that only included certain perspectives and concerns. So here we have this Torah, and I wonder for what it means for us here at Temple Beth Tikvah to recreate holy time, sparks flying. It's because it's very poetic, but what could it mean for us, in a less poetic language? What is this holy time with sparks flying for us here, here in Fullerton, California, on an early Saturday afternoon? Susan?
Well, it strikes me that the speaker is described as engaged in life. And so it's that combination where at the end the two come together. It is bringing the tradition and also recognizing the life around and looking at the whole picture, not just one or the other. But for us, it's doing the deeds, living the life.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful. This idea of bringing tradition and life together, or rather making tradition alive through integrating it into our life. Any other thoughts, ideas, sparks?
I want to take it back to the Matovu a minute, because I always see that there's a duality in the Hebrew where it says Matovu ohalecha Yaakov. An ohel is a tent, and it's associated with Jacob. But then the second half of that is Mishknotecha, where the tent becomes a sanctuary and Yaakov becomes Yisrael. So there's a transformation and an evolution. And I think that I've heard it said many times that people in other parts of our own community are unaware of this little temple up on the hill. Those that live in Irvine, where the hustle and bustle of Judaism lives, they don't even know where Fullerton is. And yet here we are, evolving on a day-to-day basis, just starting a new chapter in our history, approaching our 60th anniversary, and having this vibrancy that, and each new chapter, each new board that takes office, each new rabbi we welcome into our community adds to the pot and adds to who we are. Some of us have been here and we have been in this 4 or 5 walls, however many there are in this room, for many years. But it's only a building. What's really important is what happens inside the walls. So that's us. And I think that by us all working together and delegating and adding our own spark, that's how we become that voice of hope, that house of hope that carries us forward into our future.
Well, it was so beautifully said that all I can say is amen. I wanted to thank you for your voices. They were these sparks of creativity, of energy, of hopes and dreams and critical thinking and questions. And this is, I'm not sure what recreating holy time together is, but I feel that that by being engaged with the text and with ourselves, we recreated this holy time. So thank you for that. Shabbat Shalom.